was more of a social drinking for social anxiety. It became a problem. I was drinking a lot more to the point of blacking out. Everyone's recovery is different. You have to take away whatever it is that is letting you control the way you feel. At one point, it's like everything I love is being taken away from me. Unfortunately, society has a lot of it backwards. I get to relearn who I am and be the person that I've always wanted to be. The easy part for me was putting the substance down. The hard part is the recovery.
Did you have a rock bottom moment?
A rock bottom moment? I did not have a rock bottom moment. I had a moment of overwhelming shit, I guess I could say, where I was sick of the same story playing out and playing out and playing out. And that was kind of, we all have some kind of point of, we could call it a rock bottom, but that was where I decided that enough was enough.
Mm-hmm. I feel like everybody's rock bottoms are definitely way different. Like I did a podcast with somebody and I was like, man, you would have thought that the first rock bottom that you had would have been your rock bottom, but it just kept going more rock bottom. And so I feel like everybody's rock bottom is definitely way different. And maybe your rock bottom is very like minimal compared to some people's. Similar to mine. Mine wasn't like a slap in my face. Well, I guess it kind of was, but like it's just different. You're right. You do get sick of the like same cycle over and over. So you smoked weed?
Yeah. I started smoking weed when I was 15, and that was my substance of choice was weed.
And when did alcohol come into play?
I was good with alcohol. I was never a big drinker. Alcohol came into play when I got divorced back in 2014. Alcohol was okay. Then I noticed I was using alcohol more to run from my problems. And that problem was more of like a social anxiety problem where I would get so high that I would have to drink to like numb out a little bit and change how I was thinking, because I'd get so paranoid because I'd be so high. So that's where the alcohol came into play. I like really never drink alone. It was more of a social drinking for social anxiety. But then it became a problem where I was going out a lot more and drinking a lot more to the point, um, blacking out, all those things. When I was younger, I'd black out like on a Friday, then, it was more of a binge drinking. Then I noticed as I got older, uh, it just became more of a problem.
Yeah. So how many years did that like those blackouts and binges go for?
It kind of, it slowly got, worse, I guess you could say. Um, I could say I had a little time where I was sober in 2019. It was like January to July-ish, and I remember I
Sober
started
from weed and alcohol?
just alcohol, just alcohol. I was just still using weed. Then I started drinking again, and that's when I really noticed the blackouts would get really bad. Um, it wasn't so much binge drinking; it was the need to feel wanted.
Yeah.
So I would go out and hang out with friends, and that's where um, I would just keep drinking and try to keep them around, so I wasn't alone. So I just keep drinking and drinking, and I'd kind of trap them there, I would say.
I find that like as you were talking about that, it brings me back to I felt like I couldn't ever leave the situation. I couldn't like, not I couldn't stop drinking because I didn't want people to leave, and I always wanted, like, to feel included, like, so it really does come down to that, like, drinking to feel accepted.
Yeah, mine was definitely to feel accepted, and there was also the people pleaser in me too, where I didn't know this till, I got sober. The people pleasing part of me, uh, was a huge deal.
Mhm.
I didn't recognize it then. It was just some trauma from childhood that, I now recognize where it came from, but it was just the need to feel wanted and for people to like me and for me to have somewhere to go, with a connection. And unfortunately, that connection was through, substance abuse. It wasn't through, uh, I guess you could say, healthy connections.
So you mentioned childhood trauma. I feel, um, you probably didn't automatically recognize this until probably, like, at least a year into your sobriety?
It was kind of weird how my sobriety happened. I became a part of a group, and we meet weekly, and there was topics, and there was a lot of times where I'd have those light bulb moments from the just having the conversation and being vulnerable. Then I'd wake up, go, this is where that came from,
Yeah.
and so I kind of got mine a little earlier. It was probably about 4 months, um, once I got into recovery, that I noticed that there was some reasons why I would do certain stuff, and it was just coming out through being vulnerable with other people that going through the same stuff.
Mhm. Um, so you said 4 months. I feel like a lot of people right around that 4-month period, at least for me, like, a lot of emotions start coming out, a lot of, "Aha," like, that's why like, it's crazy, like, that all of this time that we were, smoking and drinking or using other substances, and then finally, like, once we become sober, we're like, "Oh." I've had people message me and be like, "How do I get through?" And that 4-month phase, I feel like is so hard for a lot of people. And I think it's because those emotions are coming out. Those feelings that have been buried for all those years are just, like, starting to, like, slowly come up. I remember I found myself angry in 4 months.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, so my first 3 months, I was just, what a lot of us call white knuckling it. I didn't know anything. My goal was just not to drink or use. Um, so that's what I woke up with every day, and a lot of us have to start that way. Then, I wasn't. It was kind of like a cross addiction that I could kind of say, whereas I became addicted to being sober, which that's fine, but I wasn't doing anything to help myself out. I was just being sober and not drinking or using substances. And I'd wake up and go, I'm not going to use today. And then I became addicted to that. Then it just, I was kind of falling off the rails a little bit. I mean, I was staying sober, but I didn't know what to do with myself. I was, like you were saying, angry, sad, all those emotions that I never felt before. Like, I felt them, of course, but these were real this time. There
Right.
was no cloudiness or something gathered around it. It was just, boom, here they are. And I didn't know what those emotions were. I couldn't name them. Um, I could go, well, I feel this way, but no clue. Then, when I started unpacking all that stuff, is where a lot of the magic started happening. I'd say is, in the recovery part, and I tell this to a lot of people, the easy part for me was putting the substance down.
Right.
The hard part is the recovery.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, society has a lot of it backwards. It's like showing the struggles of people trying to put down the substance. Yes, it's hard, but there's a reason they keep going back to that substance is because they can't live without that. They don't know how to live. They don't know how to act. So, of course, when it's easy to go back to that, of course, we're going to go back to that. You know, it's frustrating that, society doesn't talk about once we put those things down, it doesn't matter what your addiction is where do you go from there?
Right.
And I didn't know where to go, and I don't think a lot of people do. Um, yeah, you could be a part of whatever groups or any of that stuff, but I just know for me it was vulnerability and finding connection.
Yeah. And when did you create your social media? Like, do you feel like that may have helped you find your that that piece of you?
So I've had social media for a while. I'm not super active on it. Um, I do remember I didn't tell anyone that I was uh, quitting anything except for my mom and some family members. And I don't remember how many days it was, but I posted I was sober, and it was kind of weird because I opened that door to let people in to know that I was not using anymore, but I didn't want anything back.
Right.
I just wanted to put that out there, and I got a lot back and a lot of positive, but a lot of it I didn't know how to deal with it. It's like, why didn't you tell us?
I got that too.
Yeah, and like, what do we do with that? What do you mean?
Right.
Why didn't I tell you? Um,
Right.
there's a lot of shame and guilt there, right? Like, it was hard enough for us just to put down whatever we're putting down, but just come out. I'm not that type of person just to come out on social media and be like, "Oh, I'm quitting." Um, I'm a pretty private person, so it was weird, and um, I've on the podcast I have, somehow the podcast I have is it's nothing about sobriety or anything like that. It's about endurance, uh, ultra running, trail running, running long distances. But talking with my co-host on there, and for some reason, we just started getting people that wanted to come on that were also in recovery, and that's when, like, the social media part, the platform was like, I felt like stuff was starting to work,
Right.
and things were aligning, and I didn't even try. And I've learned when I do try, a lot of stuff doesn't go the way I want it to go.
You're right. So it's the Golden Hour Adventures podcast.
Yes, yeah.
And you mentioned running. Were you a runner before you got sober?
Yeah, I started ultra running back in 2011. That was, the year I became an ultra marathoner, to say. um, I started running in 2010, but that's when I started really hitting the trails and running longer distances. And I was using all the time. I was constantly high. Uh, I would eat edibles before my run, during my run. I would stop and get high on the trail. Um, After my run, you name it, I was pretty much always high.
Yeah. So you before and during and after because like you still run and whatnot. But what was the hardest part of getting sober for you? I mean, because that's like getting rid of two substances. And I know a lot of people are like, well, quit drinking and just turn to weed. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I just posted this. I don't know if you saw it on my
I
Instagram.
saw it. I did see that.
And, like, I don't know, I was just looking at, like, topics on alcohol, and I was like, "California sober, what the hell is that?" And then so, obviously, I got a lot of, like, flack for posting that, but whatever, because, I mean, like, it doesn't make sense, like, like, trying to, like, get sober from alcohol, but you're still gonna smoke weed, and so can you please give me your take on that?
On California Sober?
Well, I mean, just, like because you come from both places, weed and alcohol, and, like, some people say weed is better, and then some people are anti-weed. I mean, like
Yeah.
there's so much controversy around it.
For me, weed is far worse than alcohol because I learned, and I'm not saying I couldn't learn how to do this with alcohol, but it just wasn't my thing. I learned how to become dependent on it. Um, in the first 10 minutes of getting high, all my problems went away. Then 20, 30 minutes, all my problems came back and they were way worse. Super paranoid, future tripping, ruminating, you name it. It was all there. And, I saw that and I was like, I hope we talk about this because being sober to me, and everyone's recovery is different. I don't, it's up to you, but you have to take away whatever it is that is letting you control the way you feel.
Yeah.
The only way that I found that it is real and free for me is no substances. Like I've even, did this thing where I'm, not doing any processed sugar for the month, and I'm super addicted to sugar, you know. And after this thing's over, not this month's over, I was thinking about taking things away out of my life that I have to have every day, which is sugar and caffeine. You know, um, I want to get to a point where I don't have to rely on any substances to make me who I am.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I really like how you use sugar as a substance because I don't think a lot of people look at sugar as a substance. But we are addicted to sugar, and I've done the no processed sugar before, and it is hard. You don't realize how addicted to sugar you actually are until you eliminate the added sugar.
Yeah, like withdrawals from sugar are way worse than I've had from a lot of things. And I've done this more than once. I would go, you know, keto, carnivore. I've done it all. I just like playing around and doing weird stuff. But yeah, like caffeine's even hard. Nicotine's hard. Anything that
I mean, it's
we,
terrible.
anything that can alter our mind in any way that keeps us like, I don't know how to put this, like moving forward, but it's like the good old saying, "Don't talk to me till I have my cup of coffee." Like, why can't I talk to you? I'm just hypothetical stuff. Why can't I talk to you till you've had your cup of coffee? Like,
Yeah.
you should be able to wake and be able to talk to you. So, that's just kind of where my mind goes now. And, I often think about back to when we were hunters and gatherers and we were all depending on one another to live. Someone had to get the water, someone had to get the food, someone had to build the shelter. It was totally different times. And, when they used substances, then it was a spiritual thing or something else. Now, with our lives, we've become dependent on a lot of these things that maybe were not meant to be used every day, all day long.
Right.
And I'm trying to get back to where I can find that peace of be able to wake up and drink a cup of water and be okay.
I tried doing my husband's like, "I think you should do a 30-day no caffeine challenge by 3 o'clock." And I don't take my s I like the taste of coffee, I drink it black. It's helped through many cravings and urges for sugar, like, calculating my macros, whatever, I can go down a whole thing, but by 3 o'clock, he's like, "Megan, I need you to have a cup of coffee, you're so depressing right now." I was like, "Oh my gosh," I was so miserable. I had a headache, and I didn't have, like, withdrawals from, alcohol. Like, obviously, I've had several hangovers, but I never, like, anytime I when I was pregnant, I was like, "I can give up alcohol. I will not give up caffeine." And I'm sitting here going like, "Man, I am, like, preaching to like, an audience to quit drinking and give up a substance," but here I am like, "Here's some coffee." But, like, I feel like it helped me in those very early stages of getting through sobriety, and it helped me to lose my baby weight, and it helped me get through those sugar cravings, but
No, I'm right there with you. I've met a lot of people that, me including myself, was food, sweets, food, just some kind of comfort to help through those cravings. And, uh, being a stoner where I'd get high and want to eat a whole pint of ice cream. Now I'm not getting high or drunk, and I'm still wanting to eat that whole pint of ice cream. So that's what I did. Uh, then I had to check it though. Uh, Once I started to feel that it became a problem, I had to check that and be like, well, I got to do something about this. But I'm we're taking something away that it was 30 plus years for me of doing every single day. Sometimes we have to find something to replace it with. It may not be healthy in some people's eyes, but as long as it keeps us away from the harm we're doing with whatever that substance is that was controlling us, I'm okay with, and until that becomes a problem. But what I've learned is with most people, as soon as we get rid of that substance and we get 4 to 6 months behind us, we start to realize what is still causing problems in our lives,
yeah.
and we can check that stuff a lot quicker, and it's not as crazy to deal with. I guess at that point it's like, oh, I've ate 2 pints of ice cream today, maybe I should only eat 1 tomorrow.
Yeah, I guess I've never been like, uh, I have always said alcohol and food are really close to each other when it goes to addiction because, I mean, I know several people that are so addicted to food, and that's their emotional support, just like alcohol was, like, our emotional support, and so I like, I swear food and alcohol go hand in hand, so if you can, like, break the bad eating habits just like you can break the drinking habits, like, you realize that you were depending on food and or alcohol to get you through the rough moments, like, if that makes
No,
sense.
it makes total sense. Something you were asking me if I was a runner. Then after I became sober, I stopped running for a while. Uh, and the reasoning behind that was I was going out for runs, and runs were fine. I would get back to the car and I would have anxiety attack. And
Oh.
I talked with some of my other friends that are in recovery that are endurance athletes, and those are weird conversations to have when what you could say that part is addicting too, is the running part. And I remember one friend that was like, "Are you running with intention?" I'm like, "What do you mean intention?" Uh, I said, No, I'm going out for a run. I'm out on the trails and I'm zoning out." And he goes, "You're still running from your problems, huh?"
Ooh.
And I said, "How'd you know?" He goes, "I know." And I was like, "Man, I think I'm gonna have to, chill out a little bit." He goes, "That's fine." He goes, "Just try running with some intention." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Look at flowers, look at the trees, look at the birds, look at, the trail, look at the dirt, look at the rocks." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "That will bring you back." He goes, "You're going out there and going to la la land like we did with our substances, and you're not dealing with, the bigger issues that you have." I was like, "Oh." So I would go out there and try that, and I was just like, this isn't working. And, a lot of endurance athletes were addicts, and they used whatever their sport is to get off, their substance. And, in society's like, "Oh, this is such a great thing." And I'm like, "Hold on. This is cross addiction."
Yeah.
I said, "I'm trying to undo this addiction mind, rewire my mind to not become addicted to stuff. And if I go out there and do the same thing and try to find, my church and running. I'm right there back addicted. Now I'm addicted to running. And so I just chilled for a while. Um, would try doing it every once in a while going out. And then it was just, last fall that I finally went out and was like, oh, okay, I'm good again. And it was really hard for me to, give up something that I'd wake up to go do every day and spend my weekends doing. And all my friends did it. And I have this podcast that we all talk about doing it. And it was kind of hard to like step away from that FOMO, of course. But then it was also like, looking outside of myself and going, this is the person you're trying to be, but over here you're still doing that same thing. You're still in that
Yeah.
constant cycle. And if you want to stop that cycle, you're gonna have to step outside of this too. And I remember at one point it's like everything I love is being taken away from me. And that was weird, right? Because yes, I love it, but everything that I love that so-called sets me free.
Wow. Oh my gosh. And like you hear this runner's high, like people, I mean, I've heard it pretty much all my life. Like you want that runner's high. And I guess I never thought that it was like used like I mean, I don't know, like I can definitely understand, but when you were describing like look at the trees, look at the dirt, I'm like I felt it. Like I could like picture it and smell it and like it is I don't know. Like so how long have you been completely sober?
It was 2 years in November. So
And
yeah,
it took you a year to get back on the trails?
um,
2 years.
almost two
Yes.
years. We could just pretty much say 2 years. It took me 2 years to
And
get to
so
a point where I felt comfortable being back on the trails.
do, so what did you do in the beginning when you first quit? Like how did you get through
I
like
was so when I first quit, I was running a lot, a whole lot. Then I hit that 3 or 4 month mark and started to go into the recovery part. And that's when it started unraveling.
okay.
Um, so you know, in the very beginning, I was doing all the stuff that we get told to do: journal, be mindful, exercise, all that stuff. That's what I was doing.
And it's like oh my gosh. So being cross addicted to like weed and alcohol. Um so I'm going to give you an example. I grew up like with alcohol and weed and then I went to alcohol, my brother went to weed. Like I barely smoked and I hated it. And then my brother barely drinks and he doesn't like drinking. But like I I don't I feel like I remember him saying something around Christmas time that he was gonna try to, like, stop smoking, but ye I feel like weed is so it's such a controversial thing, and when people say, "Oh, well, you can just smoke weed," like, they're the better ones because they're just smoking weed, but we're the alcoholics and drinking alcoholic but they're the same. They're used numbing his pain, his anxiety, just like I was numbing my pain and my anxiety with alcohol.
Yeah, I it's weird because right, we have this image of what we've been told what stoners are, and then we have this image what we've been told alcoholics are. And it goes back to when I was young and the dare days, seeing all this stuff and growing up in my family, one side of my family, they were alcoholics. Every family thing there was just it was planned around alcohol. Let's just be real. It was all planned around alcohol.
Yeah.
And growing up, I was just like, oh, this is what people do. And then, you know, I drank a few times when I was younger. I was like, I don't feel good when I do that. And then, I found the weed and I'm like, oh, I feel really good when I do this. So that's what I did. Then, I was really good at, and I used to play the game of like, who knew if I was high or not. And I know the same thing. Alcoholics do the same thing. Like, let's see how drunk I get,
Right.
see if anyone, um, and it's different with people's way of use. Some people, are closet drinkers. They hide it all. They come home and they sit alone and drink. Um, I was definitely that with weed. You know, soon as when I was living in Colorado, as soon as I, got off work, got in my car, technology's there. I could hit my vape pen, and I could
Yeah.
get high for my hour drive home every day. Get home, go sit on the couch, and I get high till I passed out with my vape pen on my lap. It's no different than the person that would, you know, have some alcohol in their car and drink the whole way home. As soon as they got home, drank, then fall asleep with the bottle on themselves. So
I was just gonna ask about that. Like the different like there's really no difference. Like just because you're stoned doesn't mean that you're in any better shape than the person getting behind the wheel. Like you're intoxicated either way.
yeah, yeah, it's my coordination and some of my motor skills were still there. And what scared me is I used to love to drive drunk. You know, get in the car and just start drinking was, especially on dirt roads or whatever. That was something I loved. I don't know why. I just like doing it.
And that's how I grew up. Everybody would like get a 6-pack and go drive around the back roads or a 12-pack, whatever.
Yeah, that's. So it was kind of weird because I had my one friends that we'd just go drive around and get high. Then if I wanted to go get drunk, we'd go hang out with drunk friends and we'd drive around and get drunk. So had the best of both worlds. Yeah, uh, they're both like I was saying for me the weed was far worse than the alcohol. But I th- I don't know where I'd be at if I started drinking at the age of 15 and using like how much weed I'd use. Um, because most of the time, from the time I got up to the time I went to bed, I was high. I know I probably couldn't sustain that with drinking. I could try. I could make a good effort. I did become a good day drinker when I got older, but uh, I usually passed out by 6 o'clock that night.
Yeah. I don't know if I got rid of the shirts, but I used to um have shirts that would be like day drinking shirts and all sorts of things. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so dumb. Like, how like gross does it look to see like some female like smashed at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? Like, I don't know. We were just at a brunch today, and my friend Haley and I, we were just reminiscing on all the times that we would go to brunch and just get so shit faced on mimosas, and it's like it just ruins the day. Like you have a huge tab, you go shopping, spend a ton of money, like you have to get home. Like oh my gosh, we have a story, but I don't need to throw her under the bus with me. But oh my gosh, like, but like, there's people that just smoke weed all day and they think that like if they're better than the alcoholic. Like, I don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't.
You're a
It,
weedaholic.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's weird for me now. Now that you bring that up, like I guess I haven't like thought about it that way.
Right.
See, like sometimes just like you get into your spratty part and it's just whatever, right? Everything changes. But now that you say that, like I have I still have lots of friends that stoner friends that that's all they do, and they do think it's okay. Uh, one of the biggest thing is, I guess for me, is it took me stopping and quitting to learn this, and like we were talking about the rock bottom earlier, like really with, weed, there might not be a rock bottom, right? Depending on the state you live in, a lot of it's recreational now. You can Colorado, there's as many dispensaries as Starbucks, there's, Starbucks, a dispensary, and a bar right next to each other. So, there's all that. And it's okay. Like,
But Idaho, there's no dispensaries.
yeah, and I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. So
There's barely any alcohol. Or the
right.
content's extra low.
You're right. So it was drinking was, so taboo when I was growing up. But then once you tell people not to do something, and of course we're gonna go out there and do it, even harder, even better, whatever you want to say. And I've spent a lot of time in Idaho, so it's the same kind of ish, except you guys can buy lotto tickets in Idaho. I remember driving up and getting lotto tickets from Utah because we couldn't buy them. The same kind of mentality though, with the culture there. Then when I moved, to Colorado, and it was medical, then it became recreational,
Mhm.
and it was everywhere. Like I remember people complaining because before you go in the grocery store, the whole parking lot would just smell like weed. I thought it was cool. I'm sure all the other stoners thought it was cool too. Like we can go smoke weed before we go into the grocery store and not get in trouble,
Is
get
it a
arrested,
skunk
or
or is it a weed?
right. And living now in the state I do live in, South Dakota, there's medical and recreational has been on the ballot a couple times, and it was on the ballot this year. And I'm not trying to get political or anything, but I've seen what it has done to states. Yes, if the money gets taxed and goes to the right places, fine. Everyone should be able to choose what they want to do. But seeing what it did in Colorado,
Oregon, Washington, California. Like,
yes,
I mean,
yes,
you don't have to be political or pick sides, but you have to have common sense to see what it's done.
yeah, it was just like, no, like if we had to go back in time and legalize alcohol over again, I don't think it'd be legal. I don't think
Right.
alcohol, with what we know now, alcohol would be one of the worst, drugs we could call it, even though it is a drug out there. Um, it, Whenever society deems something is okay and you get the masses to agree, it just changes people's lives. And
Yeah.
I was one of those people, and it was okay. Then once I stopped, it wasn't okay. It's really weird to me still to look back at high school friends and friends I've had, that still use a lot, just because it took me to figure this out on my own, and there was no rock bottom. It was just a decision of the same stupid story that I kept doing over and over and over again that I didn't want to do anymore. For me to stop, and we were talking about other addictions, it's like I just I really want people to know that there is another side to life without having some kind of coping mechanism in a substance or that dopamine hit, because we know social media does the same thing.
Yeah.
Porn addicts, they're just getting a dopamine hit.
Gambling, sex, shopping.
Yeah, all that, right? There is another side to life without that, and however you can get there is going to take you to get there. But I've heard this like more than once. What am I going to do without this?
Yeah. Me too.
And I don't have an answer because I don't know your life. And, if you opened up and became vulnerable with me, maybe we could talk about some things that, get you there. But that is just playing the victim.
Yes.
And I could sit here and say that play the victim card and I'm not going to get anywhere. And I have done that, that helped fire or fuel my dependency on substances. It's just a choice that we have to make if you want to make it, get to the other side. And I know for me, like life has never been so good. Like things just get so much better. And I can, 30 plus years of using, the last 2 years of my life have been like some of the most emotional freeing that I've lived.
Yeah.
In it, how do you tell people that?
I wish I could just like give them a glimpse of like what it would be like for them, but like it has to be their choice. Like we all know. I mean, it's a hard choice to make, but it's the most rewarding choice that you'll ever make is to quit.
Yeah, like I didn't, a lot of times is, we hear that the 5-year-old self, right? I don't know if you've heard that,
Yeah.
like your emotions are like your 5-year-old self when you stop, using substances. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? Then when those emotions start coming up, I'm like, I just feel like I'm like a little kid throwing attention to them on the ground. Like, what is all this weird stuff happening?
Exactly.
And then I was like, oh, okay. And I found this freeing and fun. Some people probably would think other, but sitting down and learning what all the emotions are and how to define them.
Yeah.
Like, most people, sad, glad, angry, that's all they know for emotions. There's so many more. Then, I was learning them and like, oh, I had that one, messed up. Like I didn't know what I was saying when I was using that term. But now when and this is like one of the greatest things that I've learned, like anytime something comes up with an emotion, it's like self-check, like, why am I feeling angry? I'll just use that one. I feel angry because of this. Before, I'm really angry, I need to go get high. I'm really
Right.
angry, I need to go get drunk. Right? That's all we knew. That's where our brain wired, was just like, oh, we had a bad day at work. Oh, I'm gonna go get high. Then I'm gonna get drunk. Then you're like sober, like, why am I angry? Oh, this is why you're angry? Then like, right, we sit there and break it down. Then after we break it down, we're like, what was that about? That was nothing.
Yeah. Right? It's so true. So true.
But in the past, when by the time we sat down there and whatever it took, depends, sometimes it's 10 seconds to, an hour before I figure it out. But those times is like the hour, it's like, how high would I be right now? Because I'd be like
Right?
not knowing what to do with myself. So I just keep getting high, and then maybe start drinking. Yeah, the emotional freedom of sobriety is awesome.
I mean, nobody wants to like feel the feels, but how do you like get you can't always numb yourself. Like to heal and to learn yourself, you have to be able to feel your feelings. Like I remember at that 4-month phase, I was telling my counselor, I said, the anger, I said, I have so much anger and resentment inside of me right now. And so we dug through that, and I'm still working on my anger, but like it's a thing. Like I mean, I don't know how to explain it until people have lived through it. And just like you said, like how do we tell people? We can't tell people experience it them. Not a lot of people want to experience the hard work.
No, not at all. And um, I sit in sober meetings, and the connection there. It's like there could be 20 people plastered up on the screen, and I feel like I've known them all, and I've lived part of their life with them. Whereas if I'm at the convenience store and I look around, I got like this wall up, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm safe, and I'm blocking all this. And if that people pleasing still comes in, I'm like trying to make sure that I'm okay and I'm good, and putting on this perception that everything, in my life is good. And once you take that away and like, my life's shit, it hurts, it sucks, and you can open up and be vulnerable. Oh, it feels so good. It feels so good. And I don't know
Mhm.
how to tell people that unless they're willing to, accept that. But it's gonna be very uncomfortable. If some advice, it's gonna be very uncomfortable. You're gonna learn a whole lot about yourself. And I always tell people, this I got to write, chapter one didn't end how I wanted it to end. How I didn't get to end chapter one. Let me rephrase that. But chapter two, I get to write how I want it to be.
Yeah.
And that sounds, a lot of people are like, that, well, that's just craziness. It's like, well, is your life how you want it to be? And, you could ask a handful of people and they're going to say no. Maybe some people are going to say yes. Uh, but we get to rewrite how we want our life to be and learn who we really are, what makes us who we are. And, that grief and shame we can put away. I know it's really hard for a lot of us and it will be
Yeah.
forever. But this is a journey that is going to be going on till the day I die. It's not going to stop. This addiction part, um, I don't have to say that I'm an alcoholic or a drug abuser. That's, kind of in my past now. Now I'm in recovery. Now I get to relearn who I am and not relearn, but learn who I am and be the person that I've always wanted to be without some other things interfering with my life.
Yeah. Um, wow. It's like, yeah, you just told like all like the words like out of my brain that like I wish I could like tell people also. So how have you navigated social situations and like friendships, relationships since being sober?
So I love this question because this is the ones they don't want to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so friendship. Um, I held on to the ones that really cared about me. I had to let go of the majority of the ones that only knew me for my abuse. Um,
Yeah.
the connection we shared with uh, our substances. That was it. There was no friendship there. Uh, the only connection we had was getting high or getting drunk, and a little bit of running with some of that in there too. Um, and I had to draw that line in the sand and step over it and not be friends with a lot of people anymore. I had to do that for myself. I didn't do that for them. I did that for myself. I knew if I wanted to, you know, become sober and stay sober, I had to take away the things that would not let me get there. In the beginning, like I was talking about social anxiety where um, I'd go to the bar, but I'd be so high that I would have to start drinking just to bring down the paranoia. Now my social anxiety is just gone. Um, like I've got some tools, if I have to go to some kind of social event, I have to really, kind of like talk it through a little bit sometimes, depending on the stuff. If
Mhm.
there's going to be alcohol there or, drugs or anything like that, I just, have to be cognizant and be like, hey, you know, um, there's going to be alcohol, there's going to be drugs there. I don't get triggered by it, and I hate using that word, but it doesn't do anything. I can go sit in a bar, I can be around people getting high. That doesn't bother me. The part that does still will bother me is the connection, right? So, like, say you're sitting at a table and someone comes up to ask about your drink because that's the only way they can break the ice to have a conversation with you or want to sit with you, uh, and just tell them, no, I don't drink. I'll be pretty straight up with them. I don't have to give them any excuses. I just don't drink. And if they don't want to hear that, then they just need to move on.
Right.
And where I found that hard is like work situations where you kind of have to be in a different place. If it was just, I was out with a bunch of sober friends at a bar, which I don't know why. um, we use restaurant that serves alcohol. Because I just don't go to bars anymore. There's no reason to. It's easy then because then like someone wants to offer you buy you drinks, just like, no, I don't drink, go away. But like family things, those can be hard to navigate too. But really for me, it was just being vulnerable. And there's a lot of people that will, and this is okay, I'm not talking down, but like they'll say a white lie or an excuse, like I have a health condition, I can't drink anymore. For me, I was not going that way. Like my stopping of substances was to get real with myself. So to be real with myself wasn't to lie anymore because I was the best liar. Addicts are the best liars, right? We tell ourselves lies all the time to use
Yeah.
or to do whatever. So I knew that was another boundary that I had to set, whereas you can't lie to yourself. So I'm just straight up and honest. If they don't like it, they don't like it. It doesn't really bother me. In the beginning, the people pleasing part was still there, and I didn't know I was a people pleaser, so I was still trying to figure out that. But now that I know what drives me to be a people pleaser, I can't do this all the time, but most of the time I can just shut it off. Yeah, relationships is a hard one. My best advice is you have to like sit down and look at your friends, your family members, your coworkers, and like what are those real connections, real friendships? If those connections are, shared with a substance, an addiction, you're you're better off just cutting them off.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to tell people. Like,
Sometimes they'll just fade away anyways because you're not their drinking or smoking buddy anymore. And I've learned that. I'm like, well, the only connection we had was getting drunk together. And now what do we have? Like, you don't like the same things I like. And the only thing that we have in common is one thing, but it's still not enough to, make me want to be around you.
those those ones are like some of the best because, like, I'm sure you've heard like you're not fun to be around anymore,
Oh,
or
it's so no.
yeah, you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
do you want to go out for lunch? Yeah, we can go out for lunch. You don't drink, the other person's drinking, whatever, and like you're like, okay, I'm gonna go home. But you're just not fun anymore. And those a lot of those ones do just end up dissolving away.
Yeah. And it's not like, hey, I don't want to be your friend anymore because X, Y, and Z. It just kind of like in my situation is I stopped drinking, I stopped being the escape and the provider, and all of a sudden that friendship kind of just started like fading away, and then it started getting to where Megan thinks she's better than us, and it's like that never became the that was never the issue. The issue was we don't have anything in common. I don't know how to be friends with you like outside of drinking because our friendship was built on drinking. Some friends I've gone through a lot of things with and I've drank with them and have had like really deep life things with them and we've stayed friends and like the one I went to brunch with today, it's like we've stayed friends. Nothing has changed between us at all since I quit drinking. And that's a real friend when nothing changes.
And that's kind of what I was saying with the hold on to those ones, right?
Yeah.
You brought up a thing where it was like we become dependent on each other, right? oh, like Megan had a bad day, so she's gonna call her friend and let's go hang
Mhm.
out and drink and rant. Then vice versa, right? Then once that one person disappears, it just kind of dissolves, or like you said, they're better than you or whatever. That's what they feel.
Yeah. But it's like,
I
why like, they weren't there for us during the hard moments or asked us how our sobriety was going or, like, give us any inclination that they still wanted to be a part of our life, even though we did the hardest thing. And so that's when it's like, why what am I fighting for?
Yeah, that's another good one too. Like those ones that do check in, right? After they find out. Like, after I made the social media post, I got a lot of messages and some people that was the last time I ever heard from them.
Yeah.
Then there's a few other and they kind of slowly dwindled away. Um the, and I noticed there was like some guilt or shame too on some people's sides, like, oh, I didn't know I was doing this to you. Whatever, right? You weren't doing it. I was doing it to myself.
Yeah.
I did all this by myself. It didn't take you to do any of this. Yeah, it's just family was another
The
interesting one
hardest.
too. My dad's been an addict for my whole life. Still an addict. And I right after uh, I became sober, I went down there and was visiting with him, and he's like, "I'll just give it a few months and you'll be okay, and you can start using again." And
Oh.
that was and this was my own father saying this to me.
Oh, I
And
get it. We have
at the time, I'm
relationship.
like, I didn't really think much of it. But now when I say that, and I'll say that, I say that quite a bit because I need to keep reminding myself about hearing that from him. Now he makes me really angry. Really angry. It's just like, why would you say that? You know, you, you and that's a lot of my childhood trauma too, is, the more conversations and the more understanding, that's where a lot of it came from. But it's like, why would you say that to me?
Yeah.
Then it was this was another like one of those light bulb moments. Was talking with some, people that mean a lot to me, then discussing stuff, and I woke up the next day and I'm like, ah, I just I have to cut it loose. Like my dad will always be my dad, but that's about it. And I tell people that and they're like, well, that's sad. And I'm like, it is sad. It hurts. It will always hurt. But what it took for me to get here is very freeing. It is a lot of growth and a lot of emotions that I bundled up for 30 plus years and didn't know what to do with. And I'm able to, like open that bag and let them all out and become
Mm.
free. So you may think it's sad, but for me, it's freeing. And I'll never be able to explain that to some people, but um, that's
I
just what it
100%.
is.
Yeah.
And that's another one of those relationships that I kind of just had to, I wouldn't say let go, but put a really hard boundary on, a really hard boundary. And, doing that with, a family member, let alone being your father, it killed me. It really killed me. But then it was just like I was reborn again. It was like finally I got that off my chest, and I remember, you know, telling some people and they're like looking at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, this is one of the best days of my life.
It's sad, but it's sad for them. And I
100%.
and I can say this from experience because I dealt with this, and I know my mom probably watches this, but my mom and I went through something very similar over summertime. She came around and understood where I was coming from, and everything is fine, but we're dealing with that on his side of the family now, and it's like, "No, you don't get to treat us this way anymore." And, I mean, I completely understand where you're coming from, and it's more sad for them because, like, they can't just figure it out. In a w I have a lot to say on this, so I will just, like I'll just say they can't figure it out.
Yeah. For, my case, it's could they figure it out? Probably. Will they? No. Do they want to try?
Exactly.
No way. It's not even in their mind to figure it out. So,
They don't have the problem, you had the problem. That is what I was told. Megan has the problem, we don't have a problem, and I'm like, "Oh, boy."
Y- yeah, it's so funny too, because then it's like, oh, I'm the one with the problem, huh? Then it's like, oh, that's just a reflection of yourself.
Yeah, that's a hard one. Like, those hard boundaries, I feel like, are something that we don't learn until we're sober, and then when we start enforcing them, people do not like it, and they take it as a personal attack on themselves, on, like, a personal attack, and it's not about them. It's about us. It's about, like, what we've done for ourselves, how much we've grown, what we want for our life. Like, I'm sorry that you don't want us to be shit-faced all the time, or, I mean, that you still want us to be shit-faced all the
Yeah.
time and, like, going on the same path you are, but, like, that's not the case. Like, can't you just be like, "Hey, I'm proud of you. I'll respect your boundaries." No, it's very sad for everybody involved, but they don't realize what they're missing out.
One thing, another thing too is those boundaries, they move and they change as we do.
Yeah.
Sometimes the boundaries we set for whatever reason, then we're like, oh, that one can be, you know, loosened up or it needs to be tightened up. Or I might just have to change this whole thing and create a new boundary for whatever it is. Like that's the awesome part about the recovery is something, and I always tell people this too. I learn something new about myself every day.
For sure.
And people are like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, I was under a substance for more than half my life. Like, it's only been 2 years, like, 2 years of not using a substance. Do you understand that? Whatever." But that's just how I feel, and a lot of times, uh, I've had some boundaries move, you know, in the morning, I'm like, "Well, I probably should do this." By afternoon, I've totally changed that, just because of self-reflection.
Mhm.
And people need to understand is everything is gonna change. It's gonna
Yeah.
continue to change, and you can't put stuff in concrete and think that it's gonna be okay. And I'm so stubborn. That was that's how I learned was like, well, I'm gonna just do this. Then I was like, well, that's not working. And then, you know, be able to be fluid and change stuff around and keep keep moving is a huge thing for myself. And, I some people have it easier, some people have it harder. But just for me, waking up every day is something new and can be a challenge. Um, just waking up in a good mindset
Mhm.
without that hangover, right? Because when
Yeah.
waking up with that hangover, or there'd be so many times where I'm still groggy because I'm still high, uh, and it's just what can I do to get to work or whatever I got to do. Then um, come out of it. It's just like that's how my day is going to be set, and I'm not the best at it, nor will I ever be. But I'm conscious about it now every time I wake up. I was never conscious about it.
Yeah, getting up in the morning, not hungover is oh my gosh, like, there's so many, like, times I just, like I can feel the hangover, and I'm like, "How? Why?" Like, "Ew, how do people keep putting themselves through this?" Like, do they not know that there is just, like no, they don't know, and some of them don't wanna know that there's a whole 'nother life without alcohol, and yeah.
I like that, a whole 'nother life without alcohol.
I mean, that's all I knew for to 23 years ish. Like that's all I knew.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't understand. Like you kept mentioning paranoia from getting high. Like, oh my gosh, like that paranoia is terrible. I mean, you have to be extra freed from those
Yeah.
fucking moments.
Yeah. It was weird because I remember I'd get home from work and I'd get high and it'd be good for a while. Then it'd be like trying to remember the things I did at work, trying to find something that I didn't do at work so I could ruminate on it. Then I'd get, super anxious and sometimes have a anxiety attack or a panic attack. I'm like, why do I do this to myself? I just thought that's who I was until I quit. And then one day I'm like, I haven't had one of those anxiety or panic attacks or even thought about work in a while now. And I was like, oh, that was really the problem. And
Yeah.
I don't know, we get so used to living that way, like depending how many years, whatever. Then you take it away, then sometimes you don't realize till one day you're like, why don't I feel this way anymore?
Yeah. But it's funny because we drank to ease our anxiety, you smoke to ease your anxiety, and it really isn't helping. I mean, the paranoia is anxiety itself.
Yeah, I mean, we hear a lot of times like, people like texting people and calling people what they did the night before when they're blackout drunk.
Yeah.
Then you're like, you find out what you did, and if you didn't do anything, you might be okay. But then you find out if you did something that's even worse.
Ugh.
What did we do? We just started drinking again.
Yeah. Let me just drink this away because, oh man, I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's like, like when people, I feel like 99% of the people that I talk to, like, it's cringeworthy how we acted when we were drunk. What did we post? What did we text? What did we say?
Yeah, luckily for me, like I, I I was I would do crazy stuff. So, but that's what I wanted to be known for was doing that crazy stuff. So, like the crazy stuff didn't really bother me. Sometimes the weird stuff that I wouldn't normally do would bother me, and wake up and have to call someone. Like usually, I was really good about not touching my phone when I was drunk or high
Good for you.
because I didn't want to deal with it. Like, there's still times where I like wish we didn't have to be connected, with this device all the time so anyone can call us and any of that. But I was really good at not doing any of that. But the times I did do it, I was like getting on social media. What did I post? What did I do? And like going through my phone and seeing who I texted, who I called, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I go back to like 2020 and in November, all the things that I was posting, and I'm like, oh man. Like, I definitely like this time around, it was a lot different because I wasn't like drunk online and I could like think before I like push post or share.
oh
So,
yeah,
oh my gosh, like our minds just like are, I'm gonna say smarter because like, or we have a little bit more common sense now that we're not like wasted into oblivion.
yeah. I totally agree.
Oh my gosh. Man, I really enjoy talking to you. I feel like we're gonna have to have another conversation about like maybe some family and friend situations.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm always game to talk.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the hardest things to talk about actually is friends and family because you don't know who's watching your stuff and like you don't want to throw everybody under the bus. But I mean, how do we heal ourselves if we aren't allowed to talk about it?
I'm glad you said that because um, I was like on the first recovery podcast I did outside, the podcast that I have that friends, family listen to. I shared that one on social media. I was all excited that I was on this other podcast, so I shared it. And the hate I got was amazing.
I mean, they already hate me enough, so I'm like already like I'm just gonna be open now.
Well, I was talking about it's a reflection of themselves, right?
Yeah.
So they would message other people about what I said on the podcast about whatever, right? Them, they could think it was about them. They don't know. And I was like, really? I'm like, why are you blaming me for that stuff? Like, I was just talking about it. Like, and I'm glad you said that. They don't understand how therapeutic it is for us to talk about it, whether it's good or bad. I mean, the biggest thing I think, in recovery, and is talking about it. Like, why do we have therapists? Why do we have counselors? Why do we have marriage counseling? All that. We as humans need to talk about it. Like, you and I could be having our thoughts about one thing, and it could be two totally different thoughts. But I'm thinking you're thinking this way, and you're thinking I'm thinking this way. Then I puts up a wall when that wall doesn't need to be there because we are in our own head.
Oh, for sure.
It's like, no, let's sit down and let's talk about it. Yeah, it's going to get uncomfortable. There's going to be stuff that both parties do not want to hear. But what I had to learn, though, is when it's the stuff I don't want to hear, what does that mean? What does that mean to them? And what does it mean to me? And if it means that way to them, I need to try to understand why. And it gets more in depth, right? There's more conversations that have to be had sometimes, depending on the thing. But sometimes it's just that rumination. It's like, oh, we both had this thoughts of this way. And, when one person starts to, God, I've lost the word for it, resentment, resents another person, like a whole lot happens, right? When resentment happens. And, talking about it will get rid of that resentment if there even needs to be any resentment. And without that, it's just, we're going to build that wall higher and higher. Then whatever, it's going to break. Doesn't matter. One side's going to break.
Yeah, resentment's a really tough one.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know how people sober or not sober, it's a really tough one.
Right. It's that dealing with that. Like, I look back on a lot of my past relationships and they all broke because of resentment.
Yeah.
Both ways. Doesn't matter.
Right.
And it's like, well, why didn't I say anything? Why did I feel that way? Why did I let it build up and come to the point where I completely just had to turn it off and not deal with it? And, I used to let work do that too. And now I remember I got sober and job I was working, I was starting to resent the boss. And I was like, only two things can happen. I go talk about it or I just quit. And, I was like, well, what if I go talk about it and it doesn't go the way I want it to go? Okay. Well, I can still just quit. Okay. Well, if I just quit and I don't talk about it to them and they keep doing it to other people.
Yeah.
And I was like, why are you sitting here doing this to yourself? So I found a new job and quit. And I was like, it was like, I'm really good at creating a story in my mind that's, I don't know, like, it keeps me from being uncomfortable. I can make a story in my mind to keep me from being uncomfortable.
Yeah, I feel ya.
And it's like, now it's like, I go, what's uncomfortable? Okay, that's just what you gotta do. And I know I'm gonna learn a hard lesson with that because it's probably gonna not work one day, but it's been a really good thing because now with another job, it's like I started getting resentment. I'm like, well, I need to go talk to him. I'm not gonna let it get past a couple days of being pissed off at whatever. Just go talk to him about it. And 9 out of 10 times it's like, oh, we didn't know this was happening or whatever, right? It's like, oh, I guess we just need to talk about stuff. And so it just makes me, think as a world, if we just sat down and talked more and had empathy for each other, we'd be in a totally different place.
Yeah, no, I agree. My counselor told me to write down all my resentments towards a couple people, and when I read them out loud to her, she's like, "You have every right to feel the way you do." I was like, "Thanks." Like, I mean, because, like, they were so many things outside of just alcohol that I resented this person or I resent this person for, and she's like, "Those are some really deep, hard things, Megan." And she's like, "Can you tell them this or can you tell somebody else this?" I'm like, "I don't know." Like, I write it down, burn it, at least I got it out on paper and vocalized it.
And when you vocalized it, you learned something.
Yeah,
And another thing is a lot of times it's like, well, you should just forgive. We don't have to forgive.
some
I
things are too difficult.
Yeah. If that resentment's there and we can't forgive that person, we just have to move on. Um, and that's really hard too, is just moving on. Because where we bagged all that up, where do we put it? We have
Right.
to unload it somewhere. Um, and through talk, we can unload a lot of that. Um, it may take a while, but we can get a lot of that out. And another thing I like to tell people is when stuff's not going good, find someone you can talk to. Send them a video message or whatever, and just hearing yourself say it out loud what's bothering you will help.
Yeah.
I've, you know, been doing a voice message before and talking about what's going on, and I'll get, whatever through it, and I'm like, "Oh, I just figured it out." And I'll say that into the messages I'm sending to the person. Uh, I just figured it out as I was saying it out loud. It was like, I just needed to hear myself say that. Write it, say it out loud, doesn't matter. Because sometimes that's what we need is to say it out loud, write it out, just to understand that this is okay
Yeah.
and this is an emotion or a feeling and it's here. And if we're really good at keeping it bottled up inside or run away from it, just let it out. I know it sucks, but let it out.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Man, I probably shouldn't keep you too long. And my audience, they are going to love you. A lot of people have been asking me to get like somebody on with a little bit more I mean, somebody asked for some pills and alcohol, but I feel like weed and alcohol have been like a main topic, especially like after I read that. I was like, eh. So I really appreciate you reaching back out to me. So, and I loved having you on and talking to you. And I will put in the description where everybody can find you.
Okay.
And uh yeah, I hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, let's do it again. Let's whatever you want to talk about. I'm an open
Yeah.
book.